Welcome back to the deep dive.
Mm.
I want to start today with a mental image that is simultaneously hilarious and honestly kind of terrifying.
Okay, I am intrigued.
Picture a university lecture hall.
Right.
You have a speaker down at the front, say a Christian apologist, and he's making a case for the reality of God, the love of Jesus, the whole 9 yards.
Right, the standard campus setup.
Exactly. And halfway through his talk, a law student stands up in the back row.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he interrupts the whole thing.
It's the absolute nightmare scenario for any public speaker.
Oh, absolutely.
Ah.
But it is what he says that really sticks with you.
Yeah.
He points to a generic table lamp sitting on the stage, and he says, "Sir, you could get the exact same emotional response from that table lamp if you just believed it possessed the same attributes as your God."
Wow. The classic table lamp objection.
Yeah.
It is a very specific, very sharp kind of heckle.
It really is. And it cuts deep because it's not attacking the logic of the argument per se.
Right.
It's attacking the experience itself. He is basically saying, you don't actually know God. You just know how to hype yourself up.
You're projecting.
Exactly.
Mm.
If I convince myself that this lamp loves me, has a plan for my life, and forgives my sins, well, I'm going to feel pretty good about that lamp.
You'd probably love that lamp.
I might even cry tears of joy over it.
And if you stare at the lamp long enough and you know you have enough people around you chanting about the lamp and singing to it, you might even feel a presence.
Exactly. And that brings us to the question that I think haunts a lot of people, usually at like 3 in the morning. Is religious experience just a mental trick?
Is it all in our heads?
Right. Is it just a game we're playing inside our own skulls? I was reading through the stack of research you brought today, and this theme of subjectivity versus reality is just everywhere. Because if the skeptic is right, and this is just a psychological crutch,
then we're just completely deluding ourselves.
Yeah.
And that is a terrifying thought. Because if you strip away the objective validity of the experience, what are you actually left with?
Not much.
You're left with wish fulfillment. You're left with what Sigmund Freud called an illusion.
Right.
And for you listening right now, if you are trying to live a devoted life, that doubt is like sand in the gears.
Yeah.
You really can't fully commit to something if you're even 20% sure you might just be crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Am I just talking to the ceiling? That's the fear. So here is our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just here to play defense and say, no, we aren't crazy. We want to really dig into the validity of Christian experience. We want to see if we can actually know, like really know that what we experience is real.
And there's a very specific destination we are aiming for here. This isn't just abstract philosophy for the sake of it.
Right.
The sources argue that when you have that confidence, when you actually know the experience is valid, it fundamentally changes how you love Christ. It moves you from hopeful anxiety to devoted affection.
I really like that. Hopeful anxiety is a great way to describe that shaky middle ground. Now, looking at the stack, we have quite the mix today.
We do.
We've got some practical psychology, dealing with behaviorism and brains, and then we have some heavy philosophy. I saw names like William Lane Craig and Alvin Plantinga in there.
Yeah, we are definitely going to be stretching our mental muscles today. We're dealing with epistemology.
Epistemology. It sounds like a medical condition, honestly. I'm sorry you have a severe case of epistemology.
It really does sound like that, doesn't it? But it's just the study of knowledge. It's asking, how do we know what we know? How do you know you aren't in the matrix right now?
Good question.
How do you know the past actually happened?
Right. And for our topic, how do we know God is actually there rather than just a projection of our daddy issues?
Precisely. So we are going to move from the psychological critique, this idea that we are just Pavlov's dogs, to the philosophical foundation of how we know truth, and finally, to the practical so what of living a changed life.
All right. Let's start with the dogs. Part 1, the skeptic's challenge.
The psychological objection.
So reading through the notes on this, the primary argument from the skeptical side seems to be that humans are basically just biological machines. We're wet robots. And if you push the right buttons, you get the right output.
This is largely grounded in behaviorism. And the poster boy for this entire movement is Ivan Pavlov.
Right.
Most people know the name, but they might not know the actual details of the experiment.
I always just picture a bell and a dog looking hungry.
That is the gist of it,
Yeah.
but it was very clinical. Pavlov was a physiologist, right? He's originally just measuring digestive secretions, saliva, stomach juices, things like that.
Glamorous work.
Very. But he noticed that the dogs would start salivating before the food even arrived. They would drool just at the sound of the footsteps of the guy feeding them.
So the body was reacting to a signal, not the actual substance itself.
Right. So he formalized it to study it. He would ring a bell, then immediately present meat powder. Bell food.
Oh.
Bell food. He did this over and over again until the dog's brain created a hardwired association. Eventually, he could just ring the bell with absolutely no food present, and the dog would drool.
The dog was conditioned.
Exactly. It is a conditioned reflex. The dog isn't thinking, oh, the bell implies dinner is served. The dog's body is just reacting to a stimulus. It bypasses logic completely.
And here is where the skeptic points the finger at the Christian and says, that's you.
It is a really harsh comparison. They argue that a church service is basically a giant Skinner box or a Pavlovian experiment.
Oh, so?
Well, you have the bell. That might be the organ music swelling, the dim lighting, the specific emotional cadence of the preacher's voice.
Yeah.
And you have the conditioning. Years of being told when to stand, when to sit, when to bow your head, when to say amen.
So when I feel that massive swell of emotion during a worship song, or I feel that pang of deep guilt during a sermon, the skeptic says that isn't the Holy Spirit. That's just my saliva flowing because the bell rang.
Exactly. That's the conditioned reflex argument in a nutshell. They would say that if we took a person and raised them in a completely different environment with entirely different stimuli, they would have a completely different spiritual experience. Therefore, your experience isn't about objective truth at all. It's just about geography and training.
It is a compelling argument, though, isn't it? I mean, I can't deny that my environment affects me. If I go to a loud rock concert, I feel a rush of excitement. If I go to a funeral, I feel somber and sad. We are physical beings.
We are.
But the sources you brought, they seem to think there's a pretty massive hole in this logic when you actually apply it to human beings.
There is a huge hole. It's what philosophers call a category error. It assumes that human beings are nothing more than their biological instincts. It literally treats a human being like a dog.
Which, to be fair, my dog is great, but she's not exactly contemplating the meaning of life.
Exactly. A dog doesn't have the capacity for self-analysis. When the dog salivates at the bell, it doesn't pause and think, wait a minute, why am I drooling? There is no meat here. This is completely illogical. I am being manipulated by a Russian scientist.
I must resist the bell.
Right. The dog just reacts. But humans, we possess reason. We have critical faculties. We can step outside of our immediate emotional response and we can actually critique it.
Yeah.
You can be sitting in a church service, you can feel the heavy emotion of the music, and you can still actively ask yourself, is what this guy's saying actually true?
So we aren't just mindless slaves to the input. We can process the data.
And the sources point out that if you accept the conditioned reflex theory as the only valid explanation for human behavior, you destroy a lot more than just religion. You basically have to throw out all of human dignity.
Really? How so?
Well, take heroism, for example. Why would a soldier jump on a live grenade to save his squad?
That's a good point.
Think about it. Every single biological instinct, every conditioned reflex for survival that we have is screaming, run away, or protect yourself.
Yeah, there is absolutely no bell that makes you want to blow yourself up.
Exactly. That action requires actively overcoming the reflex. It requires a moral choice. It requires a belief in something greater than biology. Things like honor, love, self-sacrifice. If we are just Pavlov's dogs, heroism is completely impossible. It's just a glitch in the software.
That is a really heavy point. If you explain away faith as just a biological reflex, you explain away love, justice, and art too. You flatten the entire human experience into just chemistry.
And practically speaking, the theory totally falls apart when you look at who actually becomes a Christian. If it were just conditioning, you would expect a perfectly uniform output. You put the kid in the Christian school, you ring the Christian bell, you get a Christian adult.
Which we know is definitely not always the case.
Right. Kids raised in the church walk away all the time. But even more damaging to the theory are the people who come from the exact opposite conditioning. You have staunch atheists raised in entirely secular homes who study the historical evidence and become believers. You have Muslims who have been conditioned heavily against Christianity their entire lives, who have radical encounters with Jesus.
So the stimulus doesn't always match the response.
Yeah.
The machine is broken.
Or we just aren't machines.
Okay, so we aren't dogs. But let's go back to the table lamp guy for a second. Because even if I am not a dog, I can still be delusional. And there was another analogy in the source materials that I found even weirder than the lamp. The fried egg analogy.
Yes. This is a personal favorite of mine.
Walk us through this one, because I am trying to visualize it, and it's just completely bizarre.
Imagine a man walks up to you on the street. He seems normal enough, but then you notice he has a literal fried egg draped over his left ear.
Sunny side up.
Let's assume so. And he looks at you and tells you with absolute deadpan sincerity, this egg is the source of my life. It gives me a peace that passes all understanding. It has forgiven my past sins. It gives me joy every time I wake up.
Okay. My first reaction is to slowly back away and call someone.
Mm.
But if I actually engage him and I say, buddy, that is just a breakfast food. It's not doing any of that. What does he say?
He says, how can you possibly tell me what I feel? I feel the peace. I feel the forgiveness. My experience is entirely real to me.
And is he wrong? About the feeling, I mean?
No, that is the kicker here. He is probably telling the absolute truth about his internal state. He really does feel happy and peaceful. You cannot disprove his feeling.
Right.
But, and this is the crucial distinction the authors make, you can question the reality that the feeling is based on.
So the feeling is real, but the cause is a complete lie.
Exactly. The validity of the experience depends on the object of the faith, not the strength of the faith. You can have 100% faith in a fried egg, but the egg has 0% ability to actually forgive sins.
Whereas if I have even just a tiny, shaky mustard seed amount of faith in a parachute...
The parachute will still save you, because the object itself is valid.
This brings us to a story in the notes that actually gave me chills reading it. It's the train track illustration. It basically takes the fried egg concept and turns it into a literal tragedy.
It is a dark story, but it illustrates the point perfectly. It's about a fraternity hazing ritual from years ago. They took a young pledge, blindfolded him, tied him to a set of railroad tracks, and told him a train is coming in exactly 5 minutes. You have to prove your bravery.
But the crucial detail here is they tied him to a set of tracks that weren't being used anymore.
Right. He was perfectly safe. Physically, he was in zero danger, but he didn't know that. He believed the lie. And as he lay there in the dark, he started to actually hear a train coming on the parallel tracks next to him.
Oh, man.
He felt the vibration in the ground. He heard the whistle blowing.
And in his mind, that train was on his track.
Exactly. The sensation was completely overwhelming, and when the train roared past him on the other line, the young man died. He died.
Heart failure. He literally died of fright.
That is horrific.
It is. But think about what it means for our discussion today. His subjective experience was one of pure, absolute terror. It was valid in the sense that his body truly reacted. His heart stopped beating. But his objective reality was safety. He believed a lie so strongly that it killed him.
So bringing this back to Christianity, sincerity isn't enough.
Not at all.
I can be sincerely wrong. I can sincerely believe the fried egg loves me, or I can sincerely believe the train is going to hit me. The feeling does not prove the fact.
Correct. The skeptic says to the Christian, you are just the guy on the tracks. You think you're safe, you think you're forgiven, you feel the peace, but it's just a mental trick. There is no God.
So how do we answer that? Because that is the wall I always hit. I can say, well, I feel Jesus, and the skeptic says, well, I feel the fried egg. Stalemate. How do we break the tie?
We have to anchor the subjective, which is the feeling, to the objective, which is the truth. We have to move from psychology to philosophy. We have to answer the fundamental question, how do we actually know what is true? Which brings us to part 2, the philosophical foundation.
Or as we called it earlier, the cure for your epistemology.
Right. Now, looking at the source material, it seems like we aren't exactly the first people to wrestle with this relationship between faith and reason, between the experience and the facts. This has been a tug-of-war for, what, 2,000 years?
At least. And it is really helpful to see the history here because it shows us that the pendulum constantly swings. We as humans tend to overcorrect.
Walk us through the timeline. Where do we even start with this?
Let's start with Augustine, 4th and 5th century, the early church era. His whole vibe was faith-seeking understanding.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning you start with the revelation, you start with scripture and God's authority, you believe in order to understand. Reason wasn't the enemy for Augustine, but it was definitely the servant. It came along after faith to help you categorize and explain what you already knew to be true.
Okay, so faith is the driver and reason is the navigator. That's a good analogy. Then we move forward to the Middle Ages. Thomas Aquinas, he was the great systematizer of the church. He made a distinction that basically shaped theology for centuries. He said there are truths of reason and truths of faith.
What's the difference between the two?
A truth of reason is something anyone can figure out if they just think hard enough and observe the world. For example, God exists. Aquinas thought you could prove that logically just by looking at cause and effect in nature.
Okay.
But a truth of faith is something like God is a trinity. You can't figure that out by looking at a tree or doing math. You need God to explicitly tell you that through revelation.
So reason gets you to the front door, but faith gets you inside the house.
Roughly, yes. He saw miracles and prophecy as signs of credibility. They were the objective credentials that proved the Bible was actually worth listening to.
But then the Enlightenment happens. and the mood changes completely, drastically. Enter John Locke. Late 1600s. The scientific revolution is really kicking off, and Locke basically takes reason and puts it squarely on the throne. This is the birth of what we call evidentialism.
Which is the mindset most of us have today, right? Like picks or it didn't happen.
Exactly. Locke argued that reason is the ultimate judge. Revelation, meaning the Bible, the prophets, the experiences, is just a witness standing in the dock. Reason gets to cross-examine it. If the Bible says something that contradicts reason, reason has the absolute duty to throw it out.
So the roles flipped entirely. Reason is now the driver and the police officer.
Yes, and this created a massive amount of pressure on believers. Suddenly, you felt like you had to be able to logically prove every single aspect of your faith before you were legally allowed to believe it. If you couldn't prove it, you were labeled irrational.
Which naturally led to the modern skepticism we deal with all the time now. But then the pendulum swung back again.
It did. In the 20th century, you had guys like Karl Barth and Rudolf Bultmann. They looked at what liberal theology had done during the Enlightenment, basically stripping away all the miracles and the supernatural because they weren't rational and they recoiled. They went back to a kind of radical, authoritarian faith.
Is this what people call the leap of faith?
Basically, yes. They argued that God is wholly other. He is so far above us that our little human reason can't possibly judge him. Faith became an encounter, an existential crisis, a blind leap in the dark. It wasn't about historical evidence anymore. It was just about meeting God in the moment without any criteria.
So we are bouncing between I need a mathematical proof for God from Locke and just close your eyes and jump from Barth. I have to say neither of those feels totally satisfying.
They aren't satisfying. And that is exactly why the sources you brought today are so incredibly important. They introduce a third way. This is where we get to Alvin Plantinga and Reformed epistemology.
Okay, I have tried to read Plantinga before, and honestly, I got a massive headache. So we need to break this down simply. His big idea is that belief in God is a properly basic belief.
Right. This is the core concept we need to grasp.
Properly basic. It sounds like a basic white girl at Starbucks.
Different kind of basic. Think foundational. Plantinga argues that there are certain things we all believe without having a logical argument for them, and we are perfectly rational to do so.
Give me an example.
Okay. What did you eat for breakfast this morning?
I had a bagel. An everything bagel.
Can you mathematically or logically prove that to me?
I mean, the wrapper's in my trash can.
That is physical evidence, sure, but maybe you planted it there yesterday. Can you prove to me logically that your memory of eating the bagel isn't just a false memory implanted by advanced aliens 5 minutes ago?
Well, no. I can't prove it. But I remember it.
Exactly. You rely completely on your memory. You don't have a philosophical argument for your memory. You just use it. Belief in the past is properly basic. Or take the concept of other minds. Can you prove to me right now that I am a conscious human being and not just a very sophisticated biological robot?
I am starting to have my doubts, honestly.
Fair enough. But you live your everyday life, assuming I am real, assuming your friends and family are conscious. You don't run a complex logic proof every time you say hello to the barista. You just naturally believe it.
Because it's obvious. It's basic to human functioning.
Right. And Plantinga asks a very simple question. Why can't belief in God be exactly like that?
But wait a second. I see other people. I remember my breakfast. God is invisible. That feels fundamentally different.
Is it, though? Plantinga argues that God created human beings with a specific cognitive faculty. John Calvin called it the sensus divinitatis, the sense of the divine. Just like you have physical eyes to see trees and you have memory to know the past, you actually have a God sense to know your creator.
So under the right conditions, that sense just kind of turns on.
Exactly. You look up at a massive starry night sky, or you hold a newborn baby for the first time, or you feel the crushing weight of moral guilt. In those specific moments, the belief God is real naturally arises in your mind. It is not a conclusion of a syllogism. It is a direct perception.
That is actually incredibly freeing, because I have always felt like if I can't out-debate the angry atheist online, then my faith is somehow weak or invalid. But Plantinga is saying, I don't need to be a professional philosopher to be considered rational.
He is saying that the grandmother quietly praying in her kitchen is just as rational as the philosopher with a PhD, even if she can't articulate the ontological argument for the existence of God. She knows God because her God sense is working properly.
But this leads to a sticky problem, doesn't it? If I say I know God is real because I sense him, and the skeptics say, well, I know the fried egg is real because I sense him, aren't we just back to the start of the argument?
Not quite. This is where William Lane Craig brings in a really vital distinction, the difference between knowing and showing.
Knowing versus showing. Break that down for me.
We know Christianity is true effectively and fundamentally by the witness of the Holy Spirit. That is the internal self-authenticating experience. It's the sensus divinitatis we just talked about, plus the indwelling Spirit of God. Romans chapter 8, verse 16 says, "The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children."
So that is for me. That is my personal anchor.
Yes, that is how you personally survive the dark night of the soul when everything else falls apart. But we show Christianity is true using arguments and evidence. We use history, we use science, we use philosophy to demonstrate to others that our internally held belief isn't crazy.
So when I am talking to the skeptic, I don't just sit there and say, well, I feel it in my heart. I appeal to the historical evidence of the resurrection. I appeal to the fine-tuning of the universe.
Exactly. It is what Craig calls a dual warrant. You ideally have both the inner witness, which is knowing, and the outer evidence, which is showing.
But what happens when they clash? This is the part of the notes that I really wanted to dig into. What happens when I know inside that God is real, but the skeptic gives me an argument I honestly cannot answer? When the showing part completely fails me.
This is where we need to talk about magisterial versus ministerial reason. This is a brilliant concept originally from Martin Luther.
Okay, magisterial, that sounds like a magistrate, like a judge in a courtroom.
Correct. If reason is magisterial, it sits on the bench, it holds the gavel, it stands over the gospel and judges it. This is the pure Enlightenment view. I will only believe if the evidence convinces my intellect beyond a reasonable doubt.
And ministerial.
A minister is a servant. Ministerial reason serves the gospel. It helps us understand the faith, explain the faith, and defend the faith. But it does not have the ultimate authority to sentence the faith to death when it encounters a difficult problem.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Right.
That sounds a little bit like saying, if the facts disagree with me, I'm just going to ignore the facts. Isn't that dangerous? Doesn't that just lead to the fried egg guy saying, I don't care that it is an egg. My reason is just a servant to my feelings.
That is the risk, yes. But here's the vital nuance. We aren't saying reason is useless or that we should ignore facts. We are saying human reason is fallible.
Meaning we can just be wrong.
Right. Think about a time you were absolutely convinced of an argument, you thought it was flawless, and then 2 years later you read another book and realized you were completely wrong. Our grasp of history, science, and logic is highly imperfect.
That's true.
If you let your reason be the ultimate judge, if it's magisterial, your faith just becomes a frantic roller coaster. One day you read a great Christian apologetics book and your faith is sky high. The next day you watch a highly convincing atheist TikTok video and you lose your faith entirely. You are literally at the mercy of the last smart person you spoke to.
That sounds absolutely exhausting. And anxious. Going back to that hopeful anxiety idea.
Yeah, it is exhausting. But if you have the self-authenticating witness of the Spirit, if you know because you have actually met God, then when you face a really tough objection, you don't panic. You say, that is a really good question. I do not have the answer right now. My showing is a bit weak on this specific point, but I am not going to throw out my entire relationship with God just because I am currently outsmarted by a podcaster.
So reason is a lawyer, not the judge. The lawyer works for the client. If the lawyer hits a snag in the case, he doesn't just fire the client and walk away. He goes to the library and does more research.
That is a perfect analogy. Ministerial reason sends you back to the library. It motivates you to study more deeply, not to give up. It allows you to hold your faith with rock-solid confidence while you simultaneously wrestle with the intellectual doubts.
That actually connects perfectly back to the mission we talked about at the beginning. The idea that confidence deepens love.
Mm-hmm.
If I am constantly auditing my wife to see if she is real or if she actually loves me, I can't really love her back freely. If I trust the relationship fundamentally, I can weather the rough patches.
Exactly, and that naturally leads us to the practical side of this whole deep dive. If we have this valid experience backed by philosophy, anchored in history, confirmed internally by the Spirit, what does it actually look like in real everyday life?
Part 3. Validating the experience through life change.
We have to talk about the whiskey and soda fallacy.
Oh, this one is great. I think my grandpa actually used to tell this joke.
It is an absolute classic. A man walks into a bar on a Monday. He orders whiskey and soda, and he gets terribly drunk. Tuesday, he goes in, orders brandy and soda, gets drunk. Wednesday, gin and soda, gets drunk. He sits down, analyzes the data, and concludes, I have to stop drinking the soda. It is clearly the common factor.
Logic at its absolute finest.
But the reality is skeptics do this exact same thing with Christians all the time. They look at a Christian who is highly judgmental, then they look at a Christian who is a hypocrite, then a Christian who is incredibly fearful or anxious. And they say, see, Christianity makes you a bad person. It's the soda.
When in reality, the whiskey is just human nature. It's sin.
Exactly. The church is a hospital for sinners. It is not a museum for saints. You are going to find profoundly broken people there. So pointing to broken Christians doesn't disprove the validity of the faith any more than pointing to a sick patient disproves the validity of the hospital.
And it is a big but here. If the medicine actually works, the patient should be getting better, right? I mean, we can't just hide behind, well, I'm a sinner forever. The source material used a really striking phrase for this: radical power.
Yes. The notes said that giving good moral advice to a sinner is like putting iodine on cancer.
Which is, wow. Ouch.
It is vivid. Iodine treats a surface scratch. It does absolutely nothing for a tumor. Skeptics often think religion is just iodine. It's just behavior modification. Stop swearing. Be nice to your neighbor. Give some money to charity.
Right. Just try harder.
But the Christian claim is that we have a cancer of the soul. Sin. Separation from God. You cannot fix that with a self-help book or good advice.
You need a transplant.
You need a literal resurrection. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17 says, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. It is not putting a nice new suit on a dead man. It is putting an entirely new man in the suit.
And this is where the validity of the experience really hits the road. The sources talk at length about how this specific experience addresses deep, universal human needs. Things like guilt, loneliness, and purpose.
Let's take guilt first. We live in a modern culture that tries to therapize guilt away entirely. People say, oh, you just feel guilty because of your repressive religious upbringing. Just let it go. Live your truth.
Right. Just stop feeling bad about it.
But the problem is the guilt usually comes creeping back. Because as the sources argue, we feel guilty because we actually are guilty. We have actually violated an objective moral law. The fried egg guy might feel better for a little while, but the egg cannot actually absolve him of real moral failure.
Because only a judge can do that.
Exactly. The Christian experience validates the guilt. It says, yes, you are absolutely right to feel this way, but then it provides an objective solution. The cross. Real guilt meets real historical forgiveness. That brings a peace that isn't just a mental parlor trick. It is a legal transaction in the universe.
And then there's loneliness. I mean, we are more digitally connected than ever before in human history. But every single study shows we are lonelier and more depressed than ever.
Carl Jung called it the central neurosis of our time. Emptiness. We are fundamentally hollow.
And how does the valid Christian experience actually fix that hollowness?
It connects us to the Good Shepherd. I know it sounds a bit Sunday schoolish, but think about the massive implication of that. If God is real, you are never, ever truly alone. You are known fully and loved fully by the creator of the universe. That cures the cosmic loneliness. And then it physically connects you to a family, the church, which cures the social loneliness.
And finally, purpose. The cosmic purpose.
This is the difference between just making a living and actually having a life. If there is no God, your purpose is literally whatever you make up. My purpose is to collect rare stamps. Okay, fine. But in 1 billion years, the sun explodes, the earth is incinerated, and nobody cares about your stamps.
Thanks for the midday existential dread. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. But if the Christian experience is valid, you are caught up in an eternal plan. You are a co-laborer with God. Your daily actions actually echo in eternity. That gives a weight and a dignity to ordinary daily life that a mental trick could never, ever provide.
So bringing it all back to our main focus today, how does knowing this deepen our love?
Well, think about it practically. If I suddenly realize that my crushing guilt is truly gone, not just ignored, but paid for, and that I have a true eternal purpose, gratitude is the only logical response left.
I stop wondering if God loves me, and I start actually responding to that love.
Exactly. You move from the defensive crouch of constant skepticism to the open arms of genuine devotion.
And that devotion has to go somewhere, right? It can't just stay trapped in my head.
No. True love always spills over. And this brings us to the grand finale of the material, the ultimate apologetic.
This was easily my favorite part of the sack, because we spend so much time on the intellectual arguments, the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the moral argument. I honestly feel like I need a master's degree just to share my faith with a coworker sometimes.
It can feel overwhelming. But the sources say the most powerful argument in the world isn't a philosophical syllogism. It is your life. Specifically, your life lived out in two directions, vertical and horizontal.
Vertical meaning my relationship with God.
Yes, the great commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. But there was a quote from J.I. Packer in the notes that literally stopped me in my tracks. He said our primary aim isn't just doing things for God, but actually knowing God.
That is a trap I fall into constantly. I think living a devotee life means living a busy life. Volunteering, serving, organizing, doing.
We all do that. It is the classic Martha versus Mary syndrome. But Packer argues that righteousness and happiness are byproducts of the relationship. If you chase happiness directly, you will be completely miserable. If you chase being good, you will just become a self-righteous Pharisee. But if you chase knowing God, if you focus entirely on the relationship, the goodness and the joy follow naturally.
It is the difference between an employee and a son. The employee works hard just to get paid on Friday. The son works hard because he deeply loves the Father.
Perfectly put. And that authentic love for the Father inevitably turns outward into love for the neighbor, the horizontal direction.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
The notes define this love very specifically. It is not just having warm, fuzzy feelings about humanity. It is having a servant heart. It is the literal washing of dirty feet. It is constantly putting the interests of others ahead of your own comfort. And this isn't just nice moral ethics. It is a strategic necessity for the gospel.
Strategic. How so?
Look at John chapter 17. Jesus is praying right before the cross. He prays for his followers that they may be one. Why? He says, so that the world may believe that you have sent me.
Wait, Jesus ties the world's belief, their actual acceptance of the objective truth, to our unity.
He does. Francis Schaeffer called it the final apologetic. You can have the absolute best arguments in the world. You can destroy the Pavlov's dog theory in a debate. You can quote Alvin Plantinga on properly basic beliefs until the cows come home. But if the watching world looks at the local church and sees nothing but division, anger, selfishness, and petty hate, they will not believe the message.
Because the physical evidence of the changed life is completely missing.
Exactly. If I come to you and say, hey, I have this miracle medicine that completely cures anger, and then I immediately punch you in the face, you are not going to buy the medicine.
It goes right back to the fried egg. If I say, hey, the egg changes lives, but I am just as bitter and selfish as everyone else, you naturally assume the egg is a delusion. But if you see a community of people who are radically different.
If you see people who actively forgive their worst enemies, who joyfully give away their money to the poor, who cross massive racial and political lines to truly love each other, that is a phenomenon that conditioned reflexes simply cannot explain. Biology dictates self-preservation. The gospel dictates self-sacrifice. When the world sees that, they have to stop and ask why.
It is a love that demands an explanation.
Yes. That is the ultimate goal.
So we've really come full circle today. We started with the very real fear that our faith might just be a mental trick, a table lamp or a fried egg over the ear.
We walked through the psychology and saw that humans are far more than just stimulus response dogs. We are moral reasoning agents capable of heroism.
We climbed the very steep mountain of epistemology and learned that we can actually know God directly through the Spirit, that properly basic belief, even while we work hard to show God through evidence using ministerial reason.
And we landed on the beautiful fact that this validity frees us. It completely frees us from the exhausting anxiety of having to constantly prove it every single second, and releases us to simply live it out, to know God vertically and to radically love people horizontally.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to take into the week.
It does. If the ultimate apologetic is our love and unity, and if we look around and see that the world is currently very skeptical of Christian experience.
What does that actually say about us?
Right. Is the world rejecting our logical arguments? Or are they rejecting us because they just don't see the evidence in our lives? Are they skeptical of the fried egg because we aren't actually showing them the transforming power of the resurrection in how we treat each other every day?
That is a really tough question, but I think it is the exact right one to ask. Because the validity of the experience isn't just a debate point to win. It is a lifestyle to embody.
It truly is.
Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.
Yeah.
It was a heavy one, but I think a vitally necessary one.
Always a pleasure to dig into this stuff. Walk in confidence this week.
See you next time.